Aside of COVID-19, there are two key big pieces of news that we want to talk about. One on the global front, one on the local global front. Good morning and welcome to the Trade Setup right here on BloombergQuint. I'm Neeraj Shah. And let's start with that big news on the global front. And I'm not quite giving you a coronavirus update today. It's been something that we've done for a number of times. So just kind of stepping back for a bit and talking about the update on crude oil. And the reason why I call it an update on crude oil is because all of us know the crude price had cracked and they'd gone below negative for a particular contract. But the point is, even the slightly far dated contracts are coming under intense pressure. If you just look at this chart, or if you just look at any chart which shows what the June contracts are doing for that matter, you'll see that crude is coming off. And I think that's the big talking point. And the reason I call it the big talking point is not because it's just crude, but is the question that all of us got to ask ourselves is this demand destruction in crude pointing towards something really nasty that will come into the other markets shortly? I mean, that is something that all of us as investors need to ask ourselves. But yep, certainly a lot of demand destruction and thereby price destruction in crude. Let's wait and watch how this shapes up. And what does all of this do to the world markets? Well, US markets cracked a bit in trade yesterday. So 2 days on a trot now, we've seen the US markets come off. Asia starting off slightly wobbly, SGX Nifty sliding off in not a fashion that the bulls would be hoping for. And while the US futures have just inched up a little bit compared to what they have done in the last few days, remember, yesterday the US futures were in the green when we did the trade setup. And by the end of the trade, they were in the negative. So I don't know if the US futures being in the green give you any kind of an indication. And that's why my belief is that the downtrend is unlikely to reverse and NBFCs would continue to remain key monitorables. Telecom will be a sector that will be in focus today, and we'll talk about the Jio deal, but I think that brings the telecom sector firmly in focus. The only problem is that I don't think it'll quite be the big market mover that people want. I mean, banks move, it moves the market. To an extent, IT moves, it has some bearing on the market. In telecom, not quite. Reliance, yes, but Bharti is not a very high weightage on the index any which ways, and that's not the stock in news any which ways. And foreign institutional investors continue to sell 2,095 crores in the cash markets in trade yesterday. The last 4 days, FIs have sold 6,500 crore rupees from the Indian equity markets, provisional data. Now, on to the key stocks to watch, and the big newsmaker is of course Reliance Industries. This morning, Facebook has said that it plans to invest $5.7 billion or nearly 43,500 crore rupees investment in Jio platforms. The Facebook investment would make it the largest minority shareholder in Reliance. The key about this is not about what it does to business, etc. All of this will be known at some point of time later. We'll get in some experts to talk about that. But just plain vanilla, based on this investment, what Jio is valued at as a consolidated entity nearly brings about the sum of part valuation for Jio northwards of 650 rupees per share. Some of the brokerage estimates or the brokerage reports that I've read priced in Jio at about 500 rupees. And that tells you about the potential upside in Jio and thereby the stock price of Reliance or stock of Reliance Industries as a result of this deal, assuming that it's ceteris paribus, other things remaining constant. This is a positive for Reliance. So do watch out for Reliance Industries in the session today, and which is why I said maybe telecom could well be in focus, because people would want to ascribe that if Jio is valued at this, would some of the other telcos be valued at this, and therefore watch out for Bharti Airtel too in the session today. That is the big newsmaker in trade today. That aside, I would watch out for ACC. I know the belief is that the numbers have beaten estimates, and yes, they have. They're better than what the estimates were. But two things that I would want to point out. One, the Credit Suisse note on ACC is interesting because it says that there is a weaker than expected pricing, even though the volumes are in line, and they are surprised by that 1.5% YOY decline that ACC has shown in prices. So it's not all hunky-dory. There are some chinks in the armor, even though they've shown some cost control. And keep in mind, ACC had rallied nearly 20% in the last 7 or 8 trading sessions ahead of the numbers. Morgan Stanley yesterday came out with a tactical call saying that over the next 30 days, ACC could underperform as well. Markets are not looking all that great. Be careful if you're looking at ACC in the session today. Very poor numbers from Tejas Networks. Q4 consolidated numbers, revenues down 80%. There's a large net loss of 126 crores versus a profit of 35 odd crores. So that stock is also something that you should monitor. And Nestle India, they've said that all manufacturing locations have received permissions to operate. They're operating on a scaled down version, but all of them are currently operating. So that's the other interesting stock. But I dare say the big news is Reliance Industries yesterday fought the crude price fall in anticipation probably of this deal. Some people may have had an inkling, and yet the stock did well and therefore could do well and therefore could impact the markets to an extent and telecom to a large extent. And then watch out for, of course, for the oil beneficiaries or the oil impacted companies, because crude oil continues to grind lower. That's arguably amongst the top newsmakers in the trading for the trading session today. Thanks so much for tuning in to this trade setup.